On the Talkback Show, on the radio, or whatever audiovisual device you choose to use. Welcome to the GBC Podcast, where we talk about the Packers and our hometown of Green Bay. We are the official podcast of the Lot 1 tailgate party, which is at Lambeau Field every home game. This is episode 100, created January 15th, 2025. I'm John. I'm in Appleton, Wisconsin. Along with me, Jeff in Minnesota and Neil on the East Coast. Say hello, gentlemen, and tell us what you're drinking.
Bonjour, mes amis. Congratulations on hitting episode 100. In honor of episode 100, I am having champagne, Marie de Moix Champagne, and appropriately, this house was founded in 1869.
Nice. Good evening, gentlemen. Tonight, I'm also having champagne. My champagne is de Margerie. Delicious.
Et moi, je bois du champagne aussi, except it's a champagne method. Jacqueline Leon. It's American made, but it's brut. Either way, happy 100, gentlemen.
Cheers.
You guys with your
100.
fancy glasses. Look at you drinking this shit right out of the bottle.
Honestly, after what happened on Sunday, I think we should all probably be drinking out of the bottle.
Yeah.
All right. You can find us on YouTube and Twitter. We are at Green Bay Chat, and Facebook at the GBC Podcast Green Bay Chat. Just the audio is available on Apple Podcasts as well as Spotify by searching for Green Bay Chat. Well, what are we talking about? Yep, it is the wild card round and effectively the end of the season for the Green Bay Packers. Sure, we'll take a look at the rest of the playoffs and what everybody else is doing around the league. This is episode 100, so we will have a bit of a celebration, and it's January 15th. We'll talk about an anniversary on this date as well. So you may as well get it out of the way, Neil. Tell us what happened on Sunday in Philadelphia.
John, I'm going to start more positively, and I'm going to actually start on Saturday night. There was a Packers Everywhere event on the night before, one of these celebrations that the Packers do in order to get fans pumped up. This was at Kraft Hall in Philadelphia. They had Mark Murphy come as a visitor. They had Sean Jones. They had Antonio Freeman, and they had Mike Daniels come. And a whole bunch of games beforehand. I won a $50 Packers Pro Shop gift certificate in the process. Fun pregame event in Philadelphia.
Neil, you've been to a number of these now. And so where would you rank this, kind of the energy, kind of who is there, the general vibe Saturday night at this Packers Everywhere event?
It was decidedly less filled and less energetic. So we went to the events both in Cincinnati and in Denver. Those were filled houses. This was not a full house. In fact, there were some Eagles fans that were hanging out, but there was plenty of seating space if you wanted to sit or stand. Once Mark Murphy spoke or the players spoke, I was able to move myself right up to the front. So it was definitely, I think, a prelude for what happened on Sunday in that there weren't a ton of Packers fans there. It felt a lot more intimate than some of the craziness that we had both in Cincinnati and in Denver.
And definitely probably more intimate than the Nashville one. The Nashville one was just ridiculous. We were lucky to get in the building, and then we didn't really even see anything that happened, just the way that the building is laid out. The Denver event was pretty nice. It was pretty spread out, but getting the picture afterward too, we had the Don Horn, Walter Stanley picture, and now this one, pretty easy to get access and get up there and get a photo with players, right?
I was like the fifth person in line for the players, and anyone who wanted to get a photo could have gotten a photo. I could have gotten one with Mark Murphy as well, except I was more interested in being the front row while the players were speaking. But yes, the Nashville event I'd actually forgotten about because we were so far away from the action. It's like, wow, there's Mark Murphy way down there that we can look at and sort of vaguely see. But yeah, it's nothing like the 5-story event in Nashville. But it was a great time because of the intimacy that was associated with it. And when Mark Murphy was speaking, it was clear that he is about to retire Packers president, and he was clearly in I don't give a fuck mode, and that he was just sort of spewing stuff out, and it was really fun. And the players were the same thing. It was an event that I actually liked a lot more than those much larger events that we've been to previously.
So they were just kind of loose and just having a good time with the fans. Like, Can you give us a little bit more about Mark Murphy? Like, why was he funnier? Like, what was he talking about? I'm curious.
He got to the point that he was making fun of Eagles fans. It's like, you know how these Eagles fans are. They get down a little bit and they'll turn on their team immediately. And, all we need for this Packers team is we just need some go pack go. We need the Eagles fans to give up on their team and some go pack go. And sure enough, the Eagle fans did actually boo their team in the third quarter of the game, which was hilarious.
Oh, yeah, we heard that on TV, definitely. You said that some Eagles fans showed up to the event as well. Did it look like they came with friends that were Packer fans? They weren't there looking to cause trouble or anything, right?
It was a brewery, so they just happened to be at the brewery on a Saturday afternoon, evening. And yeah, they ripped out some EAGLES Eagles several times that immediately were shouted down by Go Pack Go, which thankfully happened in the bar because it did not happen at Lincoln Financial Field during the game.
And then the next day on Sunday, Neil, you still have plenty of time because it's a late game in Philadelphia. You made your way around, and there is a Packer bar there in Philadelphia.
Earlier this year, I went to the Jacksonville game at the Philadelphia Packers bar, Milk Boy, and they were hosting a big pregame event as well. And, it's a relatively smaller bar, but it was really fun because it is sort of a bunch of regulars who are there, obviously some other people who were visiting, but it was very much a hometown crowd. And the photo here is with Jess, who is the person who is in charge of the Milk Boy Packers Club. And, also just a great host. And she certainly was making sure that everyone was feeling happy at Milk Boy before we all took the subway down to Lincoln Financial Field.
And Neil, you've got our friend Dave with us. Dave, who joined us in both Buffalo and Denver. You guys make it to Philadelphia there. Dave lives in the neighborhood, right?
Yeah, from Baltimore, it's a pretty easy trip for him to get up there. And, as somebody who's from Baltimore, he was remarking that, well, Philly fans may be rough, but, I live in Baltimore, so I think I can handle it.
And the artist that Dave is, another homemade jersey. He had taken a Rodgers jersey, made it into a Love jersey when we were in Denver. Now he's got somehow a Reggie White jersey. What the hell's going on there?
Reggie White is indeed the jersey to wear in Philadelphia because Reggie White obviously was a star for the Eagles. And as many fans told me outside the Linc and inside the Linc on Sunday, they think that Reggie White should have gone into the Pro Football Hall of Fame as an Eagles player, not as a Packers player. And he was obviously better on the Eagles, and you guys just sort of stole him from us at the end. Obviously, we have a very different opinion on Reggie White.
Well, Neil, that just goes to show how educated Philly fans are with football, because in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, players just simply go in as players, and it is their bust. They are not inducted into as a specific team. Like in the Baseball Hall of Fame, you have the hat of your team. We won't tell them that they got it wrong, though, right?
Well, I'm certainly not going out of my way to bring this up to them. That's for sure.
I think that it's interesting, though, that Reggie White is retired. The number 92 is retired both in Green Bay and Philadelphia. And I think we talked about this at one time as well, Jeff. There's only a handful of players who have multiple teams retiring their jerseys.
Yeah, and I think Philly fans, I mean, they don't give a crap anyway. They don't want to be corrected. They could care less. But, yeah. I mean, the fact that both fan bases revere him so much, that just tells you what kind of player he was. So that's fantastic that they were giving you crap, and it was more, I'm guessing, more good-natured than anything else, right, Neil?
Well, at least as far as the Reggie White component was concerned, there was plenty of non-good-natured Philly salutes, shall we say, but that's a separate thing.
So Neil, on your journey then to the Linc, how was this trip on the subway? Did everything go smoothly?
It went shockingly smoothly, given that it was all Eagles fans other than our group of four who were there. And I would say it was more subdued than I thought it was going to be. But I think it's partly because the people who are going to the Linc on the subway are people who live closer to Center City, Philadelphia. These are not the people that are, coming from South Philly or Northeast Philly or anything like that. They are, I would say, the more typical, more sophisticated urban clientele that you have in Philadelphia that is grossly underrepresented by the stereotype of the typical Eagles fan.
Well, that's good to hear, Neil. I'm glad you were able to get there in one piece, and public transportation was convenient. And too bad, though, that it didn't continue on once you got to the Linc. But like you said, you've got a different kind of group of people that show up from other areas of Philly and such. And I think on social media, we've also seen the ugliness of some of the Philly fans. So I'm glad that generally things went well for you.
And Neil, we can see that you have 4 people in your group. We didn't talk about your 4th person. It makes me curious. How does your brother feel about the overall safety of such a hive of scum and villainy that is the Linc?
Well, the fact of the matter is that Mark didn't have a choice in the matter because he was in India at the time. So Andrew came with me and he was very excited, even though Mark said there's no way I would ever go to a game at the Linc. And to be fair, you do have to be careful. I mean, there was a lot of shit that was given, and you've got to have a street smarts about you when you go to a game at the Linc. You can't react to people unless it's clear that they're saying something in fun. And there were certainly plenty of things that were said in a very angry tone. I had a ton of F-bombs that were thrown at me and things that are frankly much worse than F-bombs. And you've just got to sort of let that go with a smile and just let it ride, because if you react to them, they smell blood, and you've got to avoid that. But to be fair, there were some very friendly Eagles fans that we talked to just outside of the Linc who specifically said, yeah, we had gone to a game at Lambeau and those Packers fans were so nice to us. And I just hope that you have a good time despite all of these fans. So there are some reasonable Eagles fans who are there. Those Eagles fans are much more likely to be on the 100 level, the lower level, which is where I chose to get my tickets because I've been on the 200 level far too many times.
Yeah, you definitely weren't up in the cheap seats, and we've already seen on social media what happens up in the cheap seats as well. Not to say you're protected because, gravity and all, you got who knows what the cheap seats are throwing down your way either.
Yeah, but they can't really see exactly where I was. They couldn't see me. And there is a terracing that at least gave me a little bit of safety in that regard. But when I went to the 4th and 26 game, there were things that came down from up above because I was hanging with a bunch of Packers families at that time. And so you had a concentration of Packers fans. And that was fundamentally different at the Linc for the game on Sunday. There were small numbers of Packers fans that were sort of dots throughout the entire stadium, but I did not see any significant concentration of Packers fans. Even around the Packers tunnel, it was like maybe 6 or 8 people that were wearing yellow, but there was no location where you saw Packers fans concentrated. And that certainly had an impact on the atmosphere for Packers fans.
Well, and the other good news is there was no snow for snowballs, so you didn't have to worry about those projectiles. Now, this picture, the symmetry is quite striking as well. Did you guys plan this ahead regarding the numbers?
Blind luck. And the fact is the 85s are Jennings and Kraft. The 92s are White and obviously White/Rogers.
The makeshift White, yes.
Although that's a pretty solid tape job. I mean, that doesn't, at first glance, that looks okay. Looks all right.
It helps that the second number is the same.
Yes.
Yeah. Dave is quite the master of arts and crafts. Good job, Dave. But other than that, your seats are pretty good. Once the game time rolls around, Neil, how was the view of that opening kickoff?
All of the action in the first quarter was essentially right in front of me. Keyshawn Nixon gets the ball on the goal line that is closest to you here. And, well, you talk about the worst possible way for a game to start, obviously for the Packers overall, but just as far as the fandom was concerned, for the Packers fans who were there, the game immediately was, oh shit. And honestly, it wasn't until we brought it to within one score in the fourth quarter that there was any sort of hope among the Packers fans who were there. There was not a single go Pack go that I heard in the entire game. And I think that says as much as anything else.
It was shocking. I could not believe watching that. And you look at the play-by-play, fumble, 0 plays, 0 yards. I mean, just an absolute worst case scenario, because we're hoping they can take the ball, they can drive it down, kind of a San Francisco, kind of mid-90s San Francisco kind of vibe here. They're on the road. And that happens, and it was just not surreal, certainly, but just a gut punch. But all the things that went with it. Was it a legal hit? Was it not a legal hit? Was it a fumble recovery? Was it not a fumble recovery? So once that all got sorted out and Philly had the ball, I just thought to myself, well, shit, this is going to be a long afternoon.
The other thing, though, about being at the Linc is obviously it's the hometown scoreboard operators. And so the helmet-to-helmet hit is not something that was replayed within the stadium. The fact that Keyshawn Nixon actually had control of the ball on the ground and was touched, that wasn't shown in the replay within the stadium. It was just like, oh, fuck. Nixon fumbled the ball. The Eagles have it. And this is just a terrible way to start the game. I had none of the indignation that those of you who saw the replay had while I was in the stadium.
That's probably best. Because
it was quite frustrating. Yeah.
And then obviously that first touchdown in 3 plays was also right in front of me, the touchdown to the corner up there. And it was just a devastating way for the game to begin, because it's like you've got all of this hope coming in, you get the fumble, and then 3 plays later they score that touchdown. And it just seemed like a really easy drive for that first touchdown too. It was like it took no effort. It's like, oh, this is going to be a really, really long day. And I think one of the problems is that sort of set our mental tone, but that wasn't actually the way the game played out, which in retrospect makes it even more frustrating.
The tone right away, right? You're expecting to be on offense. You've got your scripted plays. The defense is probably, expecting to just kind of chill for a little bit, maybe get a feel for the game, and then get in to their defensive plan. They weren't expecting to come in on the second play of the game and be, 30 yards from the end zone. So you could feel it definitely right away that everybody's discombobulated on the Packers sideline. It does change throughout the game, but it is a huge play that took quite a while to recover from that. And it's indicative of the first half. When you look at that first half, if that fumble doesn't happen and how poorly Philadelphia plays on offense in that first half and how strong the defense does recover, it becomes a different matchup in that first half.
But I think it also played out with the Packers offense. Jordan Love did have those 3 interceptions, but I actually think his worst throw was his first throw of the game on that next drive when it was a near interception to Dontavian Wicks. That was actually a clearly just awful throw that you can't see at all what was going on. And we'll talk about the other interceptions later, but the offense was completely discombobulated by being down 7-0 before they even got the ball, when they were expecting to get the ball first and have a chance to drive.
Yeah, and I think you could tell. I felt, Jeff, did you feel on TV that Love was thrown off because of that, especially what Neil just described, that first throw? You're like, hey, man, he's just not ready. He is just not ready.
And typically when you get just an airmail throw like that he's nervous or hyped up. And thank God that didn't get picked off. But let's not forget about the asshats holding on the following kickoff. So not only did they have the fumble on the first one, but then they go ahead and have the holding. So they start very far back in their own territory. So you get a long incompletion, you get a 2-yard run to Jacobs, and another long incompletion, 3 out, they're done.
Well, I mean, that was a throwaway. I mean, there was just pressure that was on Love on that. And so, we get the ball at our 13. Instead of getting the ball at the 30, sort of where you expect it, and 0-0, you get the ball at your own 13 because of the penalty. Yeah. And you just have to play a little bit differently. And I think the important thing is that we did not have an interception. We did not do anything stupid on that first drive, even though it didn't go anywhere. And it essentially allowed a chance for both the defense and offense to reset.
Absolutely, because after that, the defense really seemed to engage. I just want to note on that next drive that A.J. Brown had his catch.
His catch, yes.
That was his 10-yard catch.
He had his inner excellence in his catch, yes.
Exactly, and then he went back to reading his book. But suddenly the defense just locks down. I'm wondering if the Philly offense was like, well, geez, that was pretty easy. So now did they get a little conservative, you think, or did our our defense really step up?
Our defense did step up. If you look at that last play of that second Philly drive, it was a 3rd and 5. It was a pass to Barkley. Barkley does not get tackled by safeties in open field. Guess what happened? Bullard hit him in open field, takes him down. Our defense played really well, and I think that was true throughout the entire game. And again, in the moment, we were so bogged down by being behind that we didn't fully appreciate just how good our defense played against that Philadelphia offense.
Agreed. Then we get the ball back, but then kind of a worst case scenario with an injury.
The Elgton Jenkins injury, I think, was the most important play in the game. I think it's even more important than the fumble on the opening kickoff, because after the Jenkins injury, obviously he got All-Pro vote this year. He's a former All-Pro guard. He's the anchor of that offensive line. And at a fundamental level, without Elgton Jenkins and replacing him with 2 players who are essentially rookies, we suffered. And we suffered in our inability to run the ball, but especially the mistakes that were made by those replacements. 3 holding penalties and 1 illegal man downfield for the replacements for Elgton Jenkins. And arguably, the penalty on Sean Ryan as a center is directly related to that as well. I mean, it was all a consequence of that. And that doesn't even get into the injuries we had to our wide receivers later. But the injuries really give you a different view. And again, during the game, I was thinking about the impact of the Jenkins injury as all of these plays were going on. But even more so, in looking at it in retrospect, it seems even more dramatic what that effect was. And you look at how our overall numbers look, and you think, well, what would that have been if we had Elgton Jenkins? What would that have been if we had Reed and Dobbs for the entire game? It was very discouraging leaving Lincoln Financial Field, or for those of you watching it on TV. I feel a lot better about this game having rewatched it a couple days later, having thought through everything that happened that basically was a worst case scenario for the Packers.
I agree with you, Neil, because consequentially, at that same series in which Jenkins went out, Love took a 14-yard sack. Only 2 sacks in the game. The other one was just for 3 yards, more of a typical Love sack. But losing 14 yards, and just at that point, I mean, that was a low. We're coming up on the end of the quarter, and I mean, the Packer first quarter numbers were, wow, really not good.
And the Eagles took advantage of it on their next drive, going all the way downfield and kicking a field goal. But thankfully, our defense stepped up again on that next drive. They got to our 13, and they had 3 incompletions, 2 of which were by pressures by the Packers defensive line, sending more than 4 players. There was pressure on Hurts on all 3 of those, but 2 of them were 5 or 6 players going after Jalen Hurts. And for all that we've complained about the lack of willingness to apply pressure by going with more than 4 men, they went with more than 4 men, and by God, it worked, and it held the Eagles to only 3 points. It's a 10-point game at the end of the first quarter, and yes, it felt terrible, but it ended up being a completely manageable score that we were able to work with for the rest of the game.
Especially since the Packers' first quarter stats, 16 yards, 1 first down, that's 2 net passing yards, and 14 rushing yards. So to be down by 10 after then Philly, they've got 103 yards in the first quarter, 39 pass, 64 rush, 7 first downs. So they clearly dominated. We're down 10. And there was still a little hope because I'm like, okay, this is has been
off.
It
wasn't insurmountable. It felt like a game that Green Bay could stay in.
So the Packers get the ball back, start the second quarter, and unfortunately, the first play of the second quarter was the long interception thrown to Wicks, but recovered by Darius Slay. And this is on a second down. It ended up being a 42-yard interception. And honestly, given that we were down 10-0 at that point, it didn't seem like a terrible call, right? It's a long interception, and there was a decent chance. It was a one-on-one play. Fundamentally, Wicks makes a better play on the ball. There's a chance, right? And it's the general situation. When you've got a long pass, the things that can happen are interception, incompletion, pass interference, or completion. You got a 50-50 chance at some level. And one-on-one, yes, it's against Darius Slay. That didn't seem like a terrible thing. It felt not great at the time, but it was a long punt. Yes, it was a punt on second down. So I guess there's your complaint about that. But it just seemed to be adding insult to injury at the time. And I think that's really what it was. If that had happened with us not being 10 down, I think it would have felt very different.
So what was the attitude then at the Linc? The home team's up 10-0. They get the pick to start the second quarter. Were the fans happy, boisterous, businesslike? What was kind of the mood of the fans?
I mean, it was a wild card game, so it wasn't like, they recognize that they've got several rounds to go. But obviously at the end of the first quarter, get through that interception, and everything looked great as far as the Eagles are concerned. And it turns out that was more or less the high point for the Philadelphia offense and defense in that game at some level. And things really turned around after that. And you just look at what happened to the Eagles after that, and how the mood changed, because the Eagles booing their own team, that was at the beginning of the third quarter. But the 3 remaining drives the Eagles had in the entire second quarter, 3 and out for 1 yards, 3 and out for 5 yards, 3 and out for 1 yard. The Eagles did have 22 overall yards in the second quarter, but they also had 20 penalty yards. And that's why their offense had a net 7 yards, if you include penalties, in the entire second quarter. The Eagles had 0 first downs in that second quarter, 0 and 3 of third downs. Our defense was dominant against the Eagles in that second quarter. And that's emphasized by the fact Jalen Hurts was 0 of 4 in that second quarter. The whole first half, the Eagles actually only had 39 passing yards, 36 net with the sack. We were controlling them in the second quarter, and this was our opportunity to make some plays. And that's really where the frustration, and you think about what could have gone differently in this game, comes into play, because both Packers drives in the second quarter ended up being consequential for different reasons.
When the Packers get the ball back after the first 3 and out, Reed has a 20-yard punt return. So, okay, the ass hats, a little bit of redemption, maybe a little bit. But then this is what we've been waiting for. Suddenly we see creativity. Suddenly we say Tucker Kraft start to have a little fun.
And we also got very aggressive. 2 Tucker Kraft tush pushes for a 3rd down conversion and for a 4th down conversion. We get all the way down to Philadelphia 17. And, this is something that's looking like, okay, we're going to make a game of this.
Again, we're seeing not sort of the vanilla plays, because I don't want to play, kind of go to what John has been saying about creativity. The Tucker Kraft, the direct snaps, that first direct snap on 3rd one, he got 8 yards. I mean, it was just like the whole thing moved, because I'm sure Philly was not prepared for that. But then they decided to go back to the well on the 4th and 1. And so it's like, yes, okay, we're seeing some creativeness. We're seeing some energy finally from the offense. And so at this point, like, okay, and again, we're only down by 10. The Packer defense has been good. Now the offense is starting to get on track until
Glover's a legal man downfield, and we start moving backwards. We end up having to kick a field goal, but nonetheless, it's a perfectly reasonable distance for a field goal.
I was going to correct you there. We had to attempt to kick a field goal, Neil.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that was also the Packers in the second quarter were coming towards my end, so that part was fun. And the missed field goal, missing the upright, was right in front of me, and the upright that's right there on the screen that's closest to me. And I mean, first of all, it's a case where we really need to get a touchdown rather than a field goal. And then to miss that field goal was just so deflating as far as, okay, we're not getting ourselves back into the game.
And that was the Packers' longest drive by number of plays in the whole game. That was like their sustained drive coming back, and to not get any point, get in the red zone and then not get any points. That was a bit deflating. Yeah, that was unfortunate. But again, we're still down only 10.
And the defense came through once again. And, the sack by McDuffie and Wooden, critical as far as that next drive being a 3 and out. We get the ball back, and now we're in a situation where, okay, we're still only down 10 points. We can move the ball downfield. And unfortunately, the drive after that was even worse as far as our replacements for Elgton Jenkins, with 2 holding penalties on Glover on that next drive. We get the ball down with 2 minutes left, but we've got a 1st and 20 after that. And I think that's when it was a feeling more of desperation. We had a couple of plays that moved the ball well. We get the ball to midfield. There's 49 seconds left. And all of a sudden, that's when we had the interception to Bond that live. And when you look at it in replay, that looked like the worst of the interceptions. And it certainly was one that went right to Bond. But by the same token, if you watch the replay of that, Tucker Kraft completely slipped. It's clear that if you watch that play, Tucker Kraft was supposed to get that ball that went to Bond. And obviously, Jordan Love was throwing based on where he expected Kraft to be. And since he wasn't there, ended up going right to Bond. But actually, on replay, it looks like a really good play to set up to get the ball over the middle to Tucker Kraft. And it's unfortunate that it ended up going to the Eagles, especially since we were down in Eagles territory at that point with a chance to score before halftime. And it was those missed opportunities in the second quarter that ended up determining the outcome of the game, as far as I'm concerned, because we scored those 2 times in the second quarter, and this is an entirely different game. The Eagles are going to feel some pressure. The Packers are going to have some confidence going into the second half. And unfortunately, that's not what happened.
The moral victory, you will, of the second quarter, though, is that Philly gets this second interception. Like, oh shit. And there's still time left on the clock. But fortunately, nothing bad happened. They didn't allow any additional points. The defense at this point is probably like, God damn it, stop turning the ball over. But fortunately, they held again. So again, I don't know if Philly was kind of getting a little conservative. I don't care. The defense, let's praise the defense here, because they kept them again from scoring any points on not necessarily a short field, but I mean, they move it 15, 20 yards, they're in field goal range again. So again, that didn't happen. So the half ends feeling like, oh my God, that was almost worst case scenario, but we're only down by 10 points.
Yeah, I mean, the key is the Packers made three huge mistakes other than that first fumble on the opening kickoff. The interception leads to nothing for the Eagles. The second interception leads to nothing for Eagles. And the missed field goal leads to nothing for the Eagles. So essentially, we weren't punished for any of our big mistakes other than that huge one right in the first play of the game. And that has to feel like a victory. And that was the defense. That was the defense stepping up.
And you're right, Jeff, going into halftime, all hope was not lost. I mean, it is only a 10-point game. That's not something that's out of hand. So now we get into the second half. Hey, great news. Second half, we do get some scoring in there. It's sparse. It's too little too late in some points, but it's still a ball game.
And it's a ball game because our defense continued to step up. You figure the Eagles get the ball first in the second half. This is the potential to have the game get out of control very quickly. Defense steps up, and then we finally decided that we were going to have a long drive that would score. Started with a Rashawn Gary sack on that first drive of the second half. Big play by our defense.
So, Neil, yes, the Packers did start to move the ball, and here's how they did it. And this is where, looking back again, it was like, okay, they needed to find their mojo. They needed to find what got them sort of here. First play, Jacobs run. Then the second play, Jacobs run. Third play, Jacobs catch.
Woo.
Then a Kraft catch. They went back to the guys that got him to the dance, if you will, or whatever you want to call it. It was successful. These are the guys that want to play. They're hungry, and it was successful. Now, part of the reason why the drive, we ended up only scoring a field goal is we started so damn far back in our own territory because Philly had a 63-yard punt. But you know what? We drive the ball down, but here's what was just like, oh my God. We had first and goal from the Philly 8 and can't score the touchdown.
Yeah, there were some big plays by Love on that drive too. The pass to Jacobs on third down, a 29-yard pass to Wicks on third down. The biggest play consequentially as far as the game was concerned was the pass to Dobbs that got Dobbs injured that also had a holding penalty. But again, we kept pushing the ball downfield. We get the defensive pass interference on Quinion Mitchell because we keep pushing it downfield. And when you look at why we didn't win the game, there are a number of reasons why we didn't win the game, but a large portion of it is by the end of the game, we were missing our top three wide receivers. And Jordan Love had a chance for a touchdown pass to Malik Heath, and Malik Heath slipped and ended up not catching that ball on second down. And then Bo Melton had a ball go through his hands. It was a stretch, but it's one that a top receiver is going to make on third down. And essentially, there were two touchdown passes that were thrown by Love if it were thrown to a top wide receiver. And while when you're down to your 4 and 5 wide receivers that you need to make that play, you can't expect that they're going to make those plays. There's a reason why they're number 4 and 5 on the depth chart. And this is a case where the injuries really were adding up. And the Watson injury obviously was standing over the entire game. And you lose Dobbs and Reed on top of it later on in the game. And it's just really tough to win against a top passing defense when you're missing your top 3 wide receivers.
Yeah, having missed the field goal, having not taken advantage of being able to score a touchdown in the red zone here, the outcome way different. So we kick the field goal. Okay, yay, points on the board. But then this is where, like all season, this seems to be the case. So the offense finally starts to get in gear. And then what does the defense do? After being stellar the whole game, they disappear. Or was it more that Philly made an adjustment? I don't know.
Philly, suddenly, what has happened is that Philly made plays, and obviously a huge pass from Hurts to Smith. The big play, obviously, the touchdown pass to Dallas Goedert, where he just physically abused Carrington Valentine. Yeah. But I will note, we've talked about the absence of pressure being brought by Jeff Hafley. We brought 7 on that touchdown pass to Dallas Goedert. We had 7 people rushing the quarterback. Hurts recognized the blitz, threw it immediately to Goedert. Goedert had Valentine one-on-one. So we cannot say that the Packers didn't try to bring the pressure in this game. There were a number of places where they did. One of them happened to be the touchdown to Goedert. In the end, it was a great individual play by Goedert and poor tackling by Carrington Valentine as well. But Goddard's a big boy, and it's going to be tough to bring him down anyway. And it looks bad for Valentine, of course, in real time. But we did bring 7 on that play. And I think it's important to note that we were trying to do something different. It just didn't work out.
Well, and the good news is the football gods then after that play did smile on us because the Philly asshats showed up finally in the game and they missed the extra point. So there's a window. It's 16-3. So now you're thinking, okay, this is a must have it, gotta have it drive. So who do they give the ball to? Thankfully, they give it to Jacobs.
Jacobs with a number of big plays on that drive. Now, to be fair, we also had a 13-yard pass to Reed. That ended up being Reed's last play of the game, and a 3rd and 7 conversion to Dontavian Wick. So it's not fair to say that it was all Josh Jacobs, but it certainly was a hell of a lot of Josh Jacobs. And he may have lost a little bit of jersey on the on the last play, that penultimate play before the touchdown. But yeah, Jacobs obviously was huge on that play, and that ended at the third quarter with the Packers on the Eagles' 1-yard line. And the photo that is on the screen is from that first play of the fourth quarter where Josh Jacobs scored the touchdown. And that, again, beautiful to see that touchdown right in front of me. Great play. And we bring the game to 16-9 at that point.
I mean, Jacobs, that 31-yard run, that was beast mode. That was a guy who was like, all right, put the game on my shoulders. I'm going to run over you motherfuckers. And he did. And it was a beautiful thing. And I was cheering on my couch. I was like, oh my God, that was a great run. It did lift the team. And it was the last play of the third quarter. And Neil, the Packer offense in the third quarter was awesome.
Yeah, 139 yards of offense for the Packers, 7 first downs. Love, 6 of 11 for 98 yards. Jacobs, 7 rushes for 56 yards and 2 catches for 26 yards. So 82 yards of offense for Josh Jacobs in that third quarter alone. And now we've got a chance to actually do something, score the touchdown in the first play of the fourth quarter. And this was Matt LaFleur's biggest mistake of the game. We had it at 7 points, and Matt LaFleur kicked the extra point to make it a 6-point game, thinking, well, we'll score a touchdown to take the lead, when the correct approach was we needed to go for 2 there, such that a field goal didn't make it a 2-score game. And I was yelling this at the time as they're getting ready to kick that they needed to go for 2 there, because otherwise a Philly field goal means that the game is essentially out of reach. And sure enough, the Eagles got a field goal on their next drive. Just absolutely brutal, because once it got to 19-10, I just didn't have a lot of confidence in our ability to come back. Certainly we're going to try. Certainly the players didn't give up. They certainly were going for it, but you've got to go for 2 to essentially future-proof against a field goal, making the game go out of reach. And that's on Matt LaFleur. And I haven't even seen that discussed that much, but it was a huge error on Matt LaFleur's part in this game.
Neil, you mentioned that the players didn't give up and there was still energy. But unfortunately, on the defensive side, there was perhaps too much energy, because this is when the stupid penalties started to happen. Now, they were reasonably ticky-tack, but nonetheless, based on how this game was called, you saw these happening and you're like, what in the hell are they thinking? They know better than this. I mean, this was like on par with the Quay Walker. You're professionals. This is the fourth quarter of a playoff game. Don't be stupid. Don't initiate or don't do that extra little push, that extra little, out of bounds. Was it egregious? No. Oh my God, no. But it still happened. And that's what kept the next Philly drive alive.
Yeah,
the 15-yard penalty.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff, my judgment on this is when I see it happen live, do I think that it was a mistake? And it's like, I saw that flag go up and it's like, well, of course that was a unnecessary roughness on Keyshawn Nixon. I mean, yeah. I thought it live. And if that's what your instinct is live, it's by definition not an egregious call.
What the hell was he thinking? Let him fall down. Don't make it, I'm going to say judgment call, but just come on. The defense was still fairly stout at that point. That happens. They get a free 15 yards and Philly was just like, thank you very much. And even though they were only held to a field goal, that's just, at this point, it just felt like that things were really starting to unravel. Did you get that kind of in the stadium, or were the Philly fans like, okay, there's blood in the water now? What did that feel like there?
I think the Eagles fans were certainly nervous about what was, they were happy. There was never a point that, that when it got to 16-10, right, that's where they were feeling nervous and where they felt something. But I didn't say that I felt nerves from the Eagles fans at all. It was just like they knew that they were the better team based on how they were playing. At least that's how it was perceived. And I think that's how I felt during the game, even though the overall numbers didn't bear that out. And the fact of the matter is that the dominant team was winning, or the team that perceived itself as dominant was winning. And it was just going to make those plays. And let's give our defense one bit of credit here. We did at least defend the fake tush push. So that was kind of fun to see us fall for that fake tush push.
Yes, the pass that was way overthrown. But unfortunately, then on the next play, the tush push was successful. So it was.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, that drive led to it being a 9-point game. And at that point, it was essentially desperation mode for the Packers. And what can you do at that point? You do the best you can. And, quite frankly, I think the Packers did well. And you get to that 4th and 3 to Malik Heath. And this, again, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier, that if we have an actual number 1 or number 2 receiver on that sideline, they make the catch.
Field.
they make that catch. They keep their feet in bounds, and we extend that drive. Now, it was still probably too little too late at that point, but the fact of the matter is that when you're down to numbers 4, 5, and 6 at wide receiver against the best pass defense in the NFL, you're going to have problems.
Yeah, but I was still, with the earlier in the game with the direct snap to Tucker Kraft. And one thing we haven't talked about is utilizing the 2 tight ends, Musgrave and Kraft. Kraft had a fairly solid game, 5 catches, 5 targets. Musgrave wasn't even targeted. Again, this is why they were drafted. As far as we know, he's complete. He's healthy because he played the week before. So why are we not seeing, once the receivers go out, which was just a total gut punch, and it was so unfortunate to see that. So again, we don't have our top 3 receivers even on the field or available. So why are we not going to our tight ends, especially that 4th and 3? Why are we throwing it out? I mean, throw it right down the middle of the field. Maybe I'm oversimplifying this, but again, this is why we have these perceived stud tight ends for this situation.
Well, Jeff, I'm going to go to that play, the incompletion on 4th and 3 to Malik Heath, and that we had a lot of those longer plays, and that is especially of what we do with Jordan Love in this offense, but we don't have enough of those plays that are underneath in the, say, 10-yard range, and that's exactly where a tight end should be good. Even our passes to Tucker Kraft, they tended to be in the 5-yard range and let him run from there. We weren't exploiting that middle of the field. Essentially, what happened to us in the game against San Francisco in the playoffs last year, where we essentially had the middle of the field taken away from us, we essentially took it away from ourselves in this game by not even trying to go towards that middle of the field. And that's what led to a lot of long passes, some of which were intercepted, some of which were incompletions. When you're going after long passes, it's inherently a higher risk play. And we've got to have more of these passes that are not super safe at 3 to 5 yards, but these intermediate passes that are so central to the core of a West Coast offense.
That's an excellent point, Neil, because Philly does have a good defense, but they don't have shutdown middle linebackers like San Francisco had. This game, that wasn't the case. So it's like, I don't know, just like we got faked out or something. I don't know. I kept going back to that, and just that's where I think, again, opportunity lost. Like, what happened here? Why was it called like that? When we may never know. But then things sort of went from bad to worse at the end.
I mean, at the end, it was just desperation, right? I mean, that last interception was after the 2-minute warning. And, I think it's very clear that there was pass interference on that, but that's a place where it's 2 minutes to go. You've got to score 2 times. You got to throw it in the end zone. And I had no problems whatsoever with the last interception of the game that was on the pass to Melton that Quinion Mitchell took. I mean, you've got to take risks at that point in the game. There's no point in just accumulating stats. You're either trying to win or you're not. If you're trying to win, you've got to score, and you've got to score quickly. The Packers tried to score quickly. It just didn't work out. And again, I would say that was pretty clearly a pass interference, but whatever. You've got to take the chance. And if they're just going to let the players play, they let the players play. And I'm fine with that too in the end. So in the end, it was because we went down 2 scores in the fourth quarter. And once you're down 2 scores in the fourth quarter, I think that you're in real trouble, and you've just got to take risks. And we took risks, and they didn't work out because we didn't have the players.
As far as playoff losses goes, probably not the worst in our adult lives as far as games that we've had to sit through and watch. A game where, hey, this was a team that they kind of fell apart at the end of the season. They get the 7 seed. They're still the youngest team in the league. They're the second youngest team to make the playoffs. there's a lot going for this team that we have to look forward to. The nice thing about the National Football League, you guys, is they're going to schedule some more games next year. We're still going to get to play again. We get to do this all over again in 2025, right? I mean, that's what we do. Is we follow our sports teams. Unfortunately, our team is done playing for this year, but we get to talk about how they played this year. We get to talk about now speculating what they're going to do for this next season, what we would like to see them do, and where we're going to go from here. Nonetheless, Neil, I think you had a good day in Philadelphia. You can't complain about the weekend you had. Social media content was great. You, again, made some good contacts with other Packer fans. And I think just friend-wise, family-wise, weather-wise, you guys had a good day there.
It was a globally good day other than the actual game. And John, I think that you made the key point here is that this was a team that had not been trending in the right direction. And essentially we got the result in the game against the Eagles that was sort of what you would expect based on your priors. And yes, you can think of all sorts of different ways that game could have gone slightly differently, that we could have won the game, but it wasn't that we were a dominant team who just got unlucky. We were a team that had stats that in the end, other than turnovers, were basically the same as the Eagles. And well, 4 turnovers are going to make a difference in a game. And the opening kickoff in the end, I mean, it's just hard to take that and spot a team 7 points right off the bat. And even if we'd played perfectly the rest of the way, it was an uphill battle to win that game.
Sure. If you're not old enough to remember Brett Favre throwing 6 interceptions in St. Louis, don't worry about Jordan Love's 3 interception day here in Philadelphia.
No, exactly, John. It's again, he was trying to win, and some of those interceptions were just kind of bad luck, as Neil pointed out earlier. The receivers were slipping and things like that. So yeah, looking back, Neil and John, what could have been, they had the talent. It's there. They showed flashes really throughout the season. They were trending down towards the end. They peaked in week 16 with the shutout win against the Saints right before Christmas. I guess that was our Christmas present. I don't know. That was the only complete game they played all season. And unfortunately, after that, they couldn't put it together again. And I think for me, that's what's most frustrating. They have the talent. The coaching is there. The will is there. The players clearly want this. The interviews with Tucker Kraft afterwards and cleaning out the locker, interviews with Josh Jacobs. I mean, this is a team that wants more, that is capable of much more. Are there a few things to fix? Sure, there are. Almost any team has that. Were some of the injuries untimely? Sure, everybody's dealing with injuries. But, okay, we can build from this. How they build from this is obviously going to be very important. Much speculation till kickoff of 2025, but certainly encouraging in any of the games they played. They played to the end. They never got blown out. They did not compete. So they were in the games. And this was, one of the games where they lost by more than 2 scored. They were 2 touchdowns down. And okay, that's fine. But just as we discussed here, they were so close, just a couple bounces one way or the other. They didn't get it. And all the calls for coaching change or, a different quarterback change. No, that's just.
No, this is year 2 of the program is effectively what it is. There was, I think at the eye test, there's a bit of a sophomore slump that happened here in 24 that was probably to be expected. 23 was a terrific season with a young team, a team that's still growing here in 24. There's not a major drop-off in production and performance from 23 to 24. And in fact,
only 2 more wins. Yeah.
Right, you get 2 more wins. You pick up 2 key players in Xavier McKinney and Josh Jacobs that redefined these roles on the field that were glaring spots that Green Bay needed to improve on, and they certainly improved there. Jordan Love, again, is consistent. I think he had a good season. He's throwing touchdown passes. He's keeping the interceptions to a minimum. We had a very low number of sacks that we gave up. The defense kind of came together. There were moments where we were curious what was going on with the defense. There were times where the defense looked spectacular, where we look at the Arizona game, the New Orleans game, teams that you're supposed to win, they win. Again, year 2 in the experiment. Year 2 in the progression is what's going on. Looking forward to what's going to happen next season. But when we look at how this season ended, with the expectations, with the way the team played, I don't think that Green Bay fell as flat this weekend as, say, some other teams. Like, I'm going to look directly at the Los Angeles Chargers. They fell flat. We know that, your Minnesota Vikings, Jeff, fell flat.
They're not my
The
Minnesota Vikings, John. I just
the,
happen to live here.
the Denver Broncos, I don't think the Broncos were expected to compete against Buffalo, but they only pull up 7 points and they fell flat. So this happens in the playoffs. It's going to happen, but you can grow from this. You can progress from this.
Yeah, I mean, the key is that we did have the second youngest playoff roster behind only last year's Packers in the last, 40 something years. It's really what happened with our veterans. And specifically, when we talked about our strengths of the team at the beginning of the year, sorry, John, that bottle is making me laugh every time. We talked about our strengths at the beginning of the year, and we talked about rotation of the front four. And the fact is that Clark and Gary both made well over $20 million and did not perform at the level that they needed to this year. Obviously, Jair was a huge disappointment, another $20 million plus player. And when your top paid players are not getting anywhere close to the production that you need from them, that's going to be a problem. And you throw in some injuries. We didn't get anything from our first round draft pick this year. We had a number of other draft picks that didn't do a whole lot. Obviously, we had some draft picks that were superb this year. But at a fundamental level, you can see where the improvement is. And I think the most important thing for me is what level of introspection is Matt LaFleur going to have? Because I do think there were issues with his play calling in essentially all of the games that we lost this year. We can go through a whole series of different mistakes that were made, and game planning, play calling, etc. He's got to have his team better prepared for this season. You even go back to the simple fact that we didn't play our starters in the preseason, and then we just barely lost the Eagles in the first game of the season. Well, if we beat the Eagles in game one, I think there's a decent chance we ended up in a different predicament at the end of the year. And the fact of the matter is that all of those games count. You can't blow off any of those games. And you've got to have an approach that you're going to try to win every game. You're not going to, but you've got to try. And I'm hoping that Matt LaFleur is going to do that. And obviously this goes with, the game planning with the tight ends, and making sure that we're not as predictable, and making sure that we don't make brain farts with timeouts or anything like that. And I think as long as Matt LaFleur is committed to being critical of himself, then we're going to be in good shape.
Taking a look at the overall weekend, let's talk about the playoffs here. We made our predictions. I got 4 out of 6 right. I did all right, Jeff. I think you said you got 3 out of 6. And
I did,
Neil,
yes,
you
3.
don't even remember because you don't care, because only the Packer game matters, correct?
At this point, I'm pulling for the Bills to win the Super Bowl. So, and as long as the Vikings lose, I don't really care.
All right. So as mentioned, the Chargers fall flat. They lose 32-12 to the Texans. Ravens beat up on the Steelers. Steelers, another one of those teams that I think kind of like Green Bay. They won the games they were supposed to win. They didn't win against the better opponents. Obviously, 28-14, they take the loss there. The other games on Sunday, as we mentioned, Buffalo beating Denver 31-7. The other game that was probably interesting, where we talk about where Green Bay could have or should have ended up in the seeding, when we look at this Commanders-Buccaneers game, and Washington played a great game. And when you look at that game, I don't know that Green Bay beats Tampa Bay in Tampa. I know that's one of those teams that we looked at like, oh, we could go to the NFC West, we could go to the NFC South. Those would be nice places to go. I still think that the way Tampa played, I think Green Bay would have had a difficult time with the Tampa defense there. Same thing with the Rams. Boy, did the Rams put together a game on Monday night. Los Angeles was not going to be denied. They got relocated to Phoenix. They win 27-9, and just about everything that could go wrong with the Minnesota Vikings went wrong. Jeff, the Schadenfreude.
Vikings Freude, please. Let's use the right word.
Yes, is that what we call it? Yeah, Vikings Freud. Term that
it was, a 14-3 wild card team, and on basically neutral ground. And wow, we going back and forth during the game, texting was cathartic. I would say it was most pleasant, because my wife is a Vikings fan and I do live in the Twin Cities. I don't wish any ill will on the team, but
sorry, I do, Jeff.
Okay, well, but the point is that, wow, I mean, there's flat, and then there's taking a record-tying playoff 9 sacks. Mm-hmm. I mean, wow. Are the Vikings who we thought they were?
I think Sam Darnold is who we thought we were. I think that's the bigger one. And the Vikings are the oldest team in the league, and I mean, this is what's so frustrating. You talk about what's frustrating with the Packers, right? Of those 9 sacks on Sam Darnold, 8 came on a 4-man rush. We could not get pressure on Sam Darnold, so he tore us apart.
2 weeks earlier.
Yeah. Why were the Packers not going to go to the Super Bowl in the end? It's because they couldn't get pressure, and that's why we ended up where we were in the standings. And, well, that's where we are, and that's why we're looking at the offseason now rather than looking at the next round of the playoffs.
Yeah, and hopefully that sort of the platoon of the defensive line, that could be a strength. Well, not if they're not performing, not if they're not getting pressure. I mean, it was inconsistent at best, bad at worst. And, when we did send more players, finally, it's had some impact. I think the overall improvement of the defense, though, Neil, the DVOA numbers were, wow. I mean, really a big jump. So I think that's encouraging. And again, if the injuries, and you mentioned it earlier, Edgerton Cooper, wow. I mean, this guy, he played essentially half a season and put up almost full season numbers for most inside linebackers. So I think, we certainly have a star in the making here. The healthy safety picks and things like that. I think there's
Bullard and Williams both had big plays in the game against the Eagles.
They did, and that's without Xavier McKinney. Who's just a rock back there, sure. And of course had a fantastic season as well. So yeah, I mean, the sting of the loss is sort of gone to a certain extent. But yeah, looking at this objectively, it's like the Packers outgained Philadelphia. I mean, a lot of the numbers, this is a dead heat pretty much. Obviously, the 4 turnovers, gigantic, but they just couldn't put it all together. And obviously, that's what's you have to do in playoff football. So is all hope lost? No. And
it's just lost for this year.
It is.
Well, Jeff, we've got plenty of episodes coming up where we can talk about the offseason and where this team is going to go next, right? This is a team with $40 million in cap space to play with, a team that is going to be hosting the NFL draft, where we're going to look forward to talking to our friend Peter about the draft and some guys who have names that Neil doesn't know yet, but he'll know them once they become Green Bay Packers. So we have that all to come up with. Hey, today is January 15th. January 15th is a very special anniversary in Green Bay Packer history. It was January 15th, 1967, that the Green Bay Packers won what is affectionately called Super Bowl I. It was the AFL NFL World Championship game at the time. That happened today in 1967. So that's a big anniversary. But another milestone for us, gentlemen, it is our 100th episode. We've been doing this just a little bit over 3 years. So congratulations. Again, you guys with your fancy glasses. Drink up.
John, in honor of you.
There you go, Neil. Be careful on that because it gets extra fizzy when you drink it from the bottle. Don't let it go up your nose. All right. Again, episode 100. So for those of you who have been following us this whole time, we really appreciate it. I still remember, Neil, when we were in Cincinnati and you said, we should do a podcast. I said, yeah, okay, whatever. I was hoping you would, I was hoping you would just fizzle away. And then when December rolled around and you brought it up again, I said, all right, yeah, we can do this. Let's do this. And we started putting together the makings near the end of that 21 season. And it's been a great ride since then. I think we've learned a lot. Neil, you've learned a lot about video editing, audio editing. You do a great job with the editing and the production here. Jeff, you've been pulling together some great moments in Packer history. The research is always fun. And as far as social media goes, we all end up having a really great time with social media anytime that we can be together for a home game, road game, or whatever it may be. So I'm looking forward to another 100 episodes of the GBC podcast with both.
Well, thanks, John. The picture that's up, we've over the last 3 years, not only do we have we had a chance to record these podcasts, but also spend some quality time together, whether it's Packer road games, whether it's, where this one was taken in Alaska. Who would have thought,
yes,
some
we're
bar,
anchored down in Anchorage. Yes,
exactly, at like 2:00 in the afternoon. So, this has been a blast. We made it to 100. And like you said, hopefully there's many, many, many more. Just the fact that we have our friends that listen to us that can kind of share in this as well, that we have continued to or continue to share lot one, the tailgate, which is fantastic.
We're now official with lot one, Jeff.
Yeah, exactly. We know
John's been official for a long time, but you and I are now too.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, we know a
lanyards.
guy.
Yes,
and so just what this kind of I would say the doors that this is open, but just sort of just the fun that this has been, and yeah, whether it's the history, whether it's the games, whether it's the travels, it's all been a blast. And I thank you both, and cheers to you.
So when I talk to people about the podcast, I describe its origins as, well, after COVID, we got used to just sort of chatting after games just on our own. We said, well, why don't we just record this as long as we're going to be talking? And what I like most about the podcast is my interactions with you two, and the fact that I've essentially got a date every week that I can go and just chat with you guys for a couple hours. And the chats that we have, not just while we're recording, but before and afterwards, it's a multi-hour venture of just chatting with you guys. And that's the best part, number one. And best part, number two, is all the people that we've met and the ways it's encouraged us to reach out and interact with other fans. And I think it's the encouragement part that, oh, we can go out and we can, talk to people, go to the Philadelphia Packers bar, go out and do all of these different activities that we've done, bring guests on, and just the excuse essentially to go and have fun and meet and talk with different people is the other great part about the podcast. And that's why it's great that we're continuing it.
All right. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit subscribe, leave us a comment. You can find the GBC podcast at Green Bay Chat. That's all one word. And we are posting that social media content on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, Blue Sky, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. On Facebook, we are the GBC Podcast Green Bay Chat. Please give us a follow on any and all of those social media platforms, and may you fully appreciate the magnitude of your impending good fortune. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Good night.